welcome to a Sparky Ninja podcast. I'm David Bettridge, and I'm with the famous and legend Sparky Ninja.
Behave. All right.
So today we're going to go over our usual discussions. I'm going to do a bit of a takeover and listen to my tones for the hour and see how that goes. We always start off with what we've done this week. So did you want to go into what you've done this week, David?
Yeah, sure. So, I jumped on a ferry, went over to Northern Ireland to ETT to deliver 3 days of training that we had arranged for them. And because I went over to ETT, this is the Electrical Training Trust, I hope I got that right, over in Ballymena. Have you ever been over there?
No, I don't fly.
You don't fly. Do you float?
Areas are a little I float. I'm scared of heights, but not when I'm in the water. I'm not thinking how deep the sea is. So
Okay.
I'm all right on boats, but
right.
I haven't been there.
Okay. Well, going there for me, because I mean, most people go from like Liverpool, where I think you do like an overnight ferry, a little cabin and stuff. I remember speaking to Paul about that, and he said he was like rolling out of the bed and all that stuff. But I actually drive across the country and I go up into Scotland, where the ferry is like 2.5 hours, so it's quite short. And I get to the hotel literally within 4 hours of that. But went over Sunday night. Monday did a course on Surge, so I did a bit of a binge on CPD on Surge. We had a good group in there, and the main point of this was to understand the selection and erection criteria of Surge, what the differences are between 62305 and 7671, because there are some terminology bits given in 7671 which are really relating to the lightning protection selection, which really, a lot of people go, well, that's 62305, but there is a consideration for the need of Type 1 SPDs, even if you just have overland TT systems, for example. So we covered that, but we went into the areas that a lot of people don't explore. So we covered things like, you know, the 10-meter requirement, oscillations, going into what all that is, and basically did a little bit of reactance adjustment, understanding the 2 FL, the frequencies and the magnitude of frequencies being the real reason why we have reactance and why we have to keep those conductors nice and short. There's a lot of good discussions. I showed a few examples of videos and stuff where I've done EICRs. Where, again, a very common problem is the connecting conductors are just very, very long. Just far too long. And therefore, obviously, the UP, you know, the voltage protection level that we have for the Surge device either needs to be selected to be very...
20.
Yeah, so it has to be selected to be much lower, so it rises with the length, or you put another device near the load. And it's just, again, it's down to this length requirement. So went through that, and that went really, really well. Then on the second day, we covered diverted neutral current. So this is again, I was first of all invited to fly. The guys they're really good. They said, okay, you know, where's your airport? And I was like, well, to be honest, I'd probably rather drive the truck because I can put a load of stuff in the truck. It'd be very hard for me to take that neutral current diversion rig down onto a plane, you know. So, you know, they were more than happy to kind of set the ferry up instead, which is the better scenario for me. I could just throw loads of crap on the truck and at the other end make magic happen. So we covered neutral current diversion, went through that and updated where things are now, looking at the latest feedback from the IET and the survey. That went well, and again, it was different guys each day. I think there was 2 or 3 guys on most of the days, but it's different group. And on the third day, we did thermography. So, you know, Amendment 4, Amendment 4 has a little bit of a hint, potentially, about recommending the use of thermography or thermal imaging devices to support EICRs. You know, I mean, that information's always been in, you know, Guidance Notes 3. But about 10 years or so, I decided I was really interested in the subject. So I did the official ISO Level 1 thermography. Then I went on to do Level 2 over in Boston in the States. And I've done it a few times, you know, thermal imaging surveys. And it's definitely one of those areas I find quite interesting. I really, if I was to do one thing more and more, it'd be that. I do enjoy doing that. So I went through different images, a little basic kitchen physics, if you will, about how it works. They took that on board really well. I took my my imaging device, this This one here, the E95, going to update that at some point, but still a very good piece of kit, really, for it. And they were really, really into it. And I've had, since that, I've had manufacturers contacted me because they're bringing more thermal imaging cameras to market. They're emailing me for a bit of advice about what a good imager is, you know, for things that like electricians to have. So there's been a lot of movement in thermal by the manufacturers, and it's important that electricians get the right understanding of what the cameras can do and what they can't. You know, so we covered that on the Wednesday. Huh?
So this comes under sort of like, you just don't buy a camera and that's it. The camera doesn't do it. You've got to think about reflection. You've got to think of all sorts that goes in.
Well,
which is key as always.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you got to say is, are you just going to do qualitative or quantitative analysis? So if you're just looking for hot spots, if you're going to go up onto a roof and look at solar panels to find dead cells, if you're going to look at the effects of shadowing, if you're going to look for cable joints, cables in the walls, then a simple one you plug into your phone is absolutely fine. You're just looking for heat signatures. That's all you're doing. If you're then going to try to actually understand the data and take measurement points, then your pixels need to be smaller. And if your pixels have to be smaller, your infrared radiation resolution has to be bigger. And it's really, when you look at the pricing of cameras, it's most often the IR resolution that is a significant price hike, you know, as to what you're paying for. So I think my one, brand new, is about 10 or 11 grand now. But it's got what I would say is a fairly good resolution for electrical. You could just get away with a 320 by 240 resolution, which is about a 3 or 4 grand camera. But these ones that are like £400-500 that you plug in, they're absolutely fine. But you need to obviously not suddenly become an expert in thermography surveying. You need to obviously take images to support your EICR. But if they then say, can you do a thermal imaging survey, there's a whole new enterprise and a whole new area of study for that. So that's one of the things that we discussed on the Wednesday. What did I do on Thursday? Wednesday night, ferry came back late, 80-minute late. So a nice quiet ferry on the way back. Do you know what? The ferry on Sunday was absolutely packed. Absolutely packed. There were people sleeping on everything that you could sleep on. It was horrible. When I did it myself, I went into the lounge. So next time I go over there, I'm going to say to them, get me the lounge. It's only like 30 quid more. But on the way back, it was empty. But I got back off the boat Wednesday night, and as I was getting out of port up in Scotland, I could see the sun going down. And by the time I drove down to England, across the country to the northeast where I live, and I got home, I could see the sun coming up. So I drove for the entirety of night. I got home about 3 a.m. The sun was just starting to come up at this time of year, obviously, just after 3. Got about 3 or 4 hours kip, then I had a meeting at 9:30.
Very busy.
It was very busy, very, very busy. I'll talk about Friday in a moment, because Friday is gonna another thing. So let's cover what you did, and then I'll talk about what I did on Friday, so you can speak for about.
My week was more design dilemmas and
oh gosh,
contemplations and queries and helping out, I suppose, trying to get some 630mm singles into a panel with about 800mm above you from the panel top, with about 1 meter to get in from the ladder. So we got the ladder coming in, we got the bending radius of 282, we got the terminals inside of 500. I need to lift the cable up about 1 meter to drop it in.
You're so really
bending radius.
That's a big.
We got
bend.
ducting in the way. It's a big starting swooping bend.
Yeah.
To get it into compliance, and like anything, it's multiples. We had a similar issue in another area where this was 400mm forecore, so a bit more of a bending radius, and it was 382 for that one. So that was even more problem. We can't remove the ducting; it's in use and service, so that's not going to work. We got a solution of basically having to jack the ladder up for now, get the cable in, and then drop it back down when we're actually in situ and terminated. So it's going to be fun to try and get that gland in there with the right radius, with no strain on the connections, in the right spot of the panel. I must admit, the panel builders are really good. They even gave you a nice schematic drawing with the actual gland in proper dimension, where it's going to go,
Hmm.
where the terminals are. So you can work it all out. I use Bluebeam Review, and I can work it all out from there, taking measurements, which is pretty good once you get the scale in. So that was one dilemma. But these 630 mil singles are like 40 meters away from the transformer. So they're going to be interesting because it isn't like anywhere. It's not a straight run.
No.
We've got some of it in ducting, and we have to come out of the ducting into a sort of grated area, and then into the plant room, and then turn, and then go down, and then set up and down over another duct, then into the the
Wow.
new position of the LV panel,
So
and then this
all
place is
those
having
little turns
17
take up a huge amount of space.
a large amount. It's quads, so what we're going to have to do is clock the rotation for the magnetism effect.
Hmm.
So we're going to have to clock the phases as well. So when we terminate, we're going to have to know we've got L1, L2, L3 here, and L2, L1, L3 over there, and the neutrals on the left and the right. So
Yeah, to
it's
try and
kind of
equalize it.
keeping it all equalized with a 300 mil main earth there. Say main earth is the earthing conductor, but main earth.
Hmm.
To there, and then from there we got to refeed another distribution board panel with 3 inbuilt Snyder units into it. That's going to run all the plant equipment, so busy. Then we got 17 boards to change throughout the whole installation, and they're going to be TPNs. They're going to be big because we got the issue of three-phase commando sockets with RCD protection, which isn't there at the moment. We're
So
bringing it up to standard.
your device is going from that big to that big because they're being changed to
Yeah,
RCDs.
yeah. And the challenge is it's in a cupboard.
Hmm.
So can't put an enclosure over here and do it that way. We're going to go with the PON Snyder boards, TPNs, and we're going to use the VigiLink RCBO modules. But the problem is they take up 6 ways in the board
Mm-hmm.
every way. So the board now is increased in size, which means we have to take all the containment carefully, take the cables out, mark them all, make the containment smaller, put it all back together, and refeed it with a new armored cable as well on top of that. And the grand thing is, we got 6 weeks to do it.
Is that doable?
6 weeks. With the team we got and the competence level of our team is pretty good. So I think we can achieve it. We have a good site project manager down there, Matt. He's really good, really experienced in it. I have great confidence in him. So
Good
I don't have to
initiative just to
worry
keep
too.
moving instead of stopping and stalling all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's very methodical. He's planned out. Everything's thought of beforehand. All the kit's procured, quality controlled, so he knows the cable's the correct type, size,
Hmm.
glands. We have check sheets that I've designed out. Uh, then I go in and commission at the end, so it's going to be a busier
Yeah.
time for me.
So on a project that's like saying 6 weeks, would there be like a point, maybe like 2 weeks in or 3 weeks in, where you would go in and look at the progress to then evaluate if you suddenly need to work more hours or try to figure out how to catch up if you're behind schedule? How would you manage that?
Yeah, we have like almost like a cause and effect emergency backup plan, and we are quite a sized firm where we can pull labor off of other jobs to help this job along.
Hmm.
So we have emergency plans in place if it all goes a little bit south. It has to be on because all the people have moved out from the offices for 6 weeks, so we need to be back in and get it all back in and on
Yeah.
and
So
commissioned and.
so if you get pulled back, if
It's a
you
lot
fall
to do.
back, you just throw more bodies on the job, but obviously able bodies that can crack on.
Yeah. At the same time, I got a big commissioning job with 500-page document from the client
Hmm.
to get through, and the witness on that job is there for 20 days.
Right. Yeah.
So you test, he's there, or she,
Hmm.
they're there with you at all times. So that job's quite challenging at the same time as that job. So my workload's quite heavy. Then I got an NIC assessment in between that.
Oh well, just throw that in there. Just why not? Got nothing else to do.
Just why not? It's certainly challenging, and I mean, if you
Yeah.
achieve it, it's good for your career.
Yeah.
Uh, do I worry? A few restless nights, yeah. I wouldn't say I wouldn't. I think we all in this industry, I think, get stressed out with time schedules and it's never easy. I noticed, like you said, you're in Ireland. A lot of our work's in London.
Hmm.
I'm not based in London. I'm in Cheltenham. Company's in Birmingham. We work in London quite a lot. It's quite a long way from home as well, so you have to factor that in there. You're staying away, so you have to do your stuff like looking after the lads' mental health, making sure they're not working too many hours, complying to the health safety.
Yeah.
Make sure the RAMs, I write the RAMs, so make sure they're
And
implemented and
it's the little things like the
done.
downtime, like when you're away from home, the downtime between the days, such as how comfortable you are with where they put you, the ability to have your obviously
Yeah,
your whether you're allowed to get a meal or a little bit of a drink, whatever, just so you can have some relaxing time. Those little things make a big difference as well. I find because I work for myself, I punish myself all the time. So I'll go away to a hotel and I'll just go to whatever hotel has a bed. I'll kip in it and I'll go there. I'll sleep and then I'll work. And I don't really enjoy the local area. I used to do. I used to go for walks and things, but unless I'm somewhere completely different I've not been to before, I'll just sit in the hotel and work and work and work and work. And that's because I'm an absolute idiot and I don't know that I need to have gaps. When I'm at home, I have this great distraction. I have all these distractions around me to remind me to spend some time with them before I crack on with doing more work. Even like today, I got in from one meeting. I was about to do another meeting. Then I was going to do this with you. The other meeting got kind of cancelled, so I thought, well, I could do this, but no, I played a board game with the missus and son number 3. We're trying to teach him how to play Ticket to Ride, so we had a quick go on that before I came on here. So just the downtime. Companies that give you that opportunity to just have that little bit of relaxing downtime will just put you in a nice place. A lot of lads next door to us is an Airbnb. It's very different to sharing a bedroom. You ever had to share a bedroom with another tradie or with
yeah,
someone in business? It's just
yeah,
as much as you may like people when you work with them, you want your own space. You want to scratch yourself without really, showing it to someone else. And so those little things. I remember once I did a job in Oldham, and the main contractor got us this room, and then there was an apprentice, and he was in a room off of the room. But he had to walk through my room to get out of the room. I was well pissed off. I was like, because he would just want to keep the door open and just walk through and chat. And I was like, I'd like to just shut the door, speak to my family, and get some naps.
yeah.
So it's the little things like that that just make people who work away either enjoy or really struggle with it.
Yeah,
But
it's certainly a challenge. It's a
yeah,
challenge, definitely. When I'm away, I get more time to do CPD and stuff uh, that I normally wouldn't be able to do at home. My partner Carla, she's very understanding to the way I am, shall we say?
yeah. No, I spend a lot of time, and what I used to do is I used to get because I train in the daytime. And I get to the hotel, and I'd actually sometimes just fall asleep for a few hours there, and then I'd wake up hungry, and it'd be too late to get a meal. So I'd always, when I drive back to the hotel, I'd get like a Tesco meal deal or something. So sometimes I won't even get a hotel meal. I'll just get a Tesco meal deal, and I'll just then get some air, and I'll do some work. Because I spent so much when I was employed in the training sector. I spent so many nights where I was entitled to do a meal. So I'd go down at 6 or 7 o'clock for this meal, and I'd be looking at all these other, like dads and stuff, talking to their kids on their tablet, and then they'd be eating dinner looking at a device. I'd be in a room full of that, and I was like, hang on, and it can be quite, when you're on your own, especially when you travel and you stay on your own a lot, it can be very lonely, and if you do it an awful lot, it can be,
Right.
it can be
Can
quite
be.
hard to actually, it can actually be quite hard on you. So is that kind of like the main thing that you do? Is it plot, looking at the design and calling it a design? You said on the previous one you don't do much on the tools these days.
No, I don't. I don't. I mean, like, if I quite fancy doing some of these boards, to be honest with you, it might sound crazy, but I kind of want to do at least 2 or 3.
Hmm.
So I do want to get back on the tool sometimes. I keep them all WD-40 and stuff. But if the lads are
Hmm.
struggling, they're struggling. You got to get in
Yeah.
and help
I
out.
mean,
You can't
I shouldn't
just
say
sit
this
there.
because I'm not supposed to, but like when I do assessing, I do site visits. If I'm on a site visit and I had this with the Sparky, a week or so ago, he was pulling twin and CPC through some joists, and he was on his own, pulling it off the drum, pushing the loop through, and I thought, I'm sat here like a dick watching him. I may as well feed the loop
Mm,
up. I may as well help. You know, because we're not supposed to get hands on. We're not supposed to do anything. We're not supposed to interfere with it. But at the end of the day, if I'm the kind of person, if I can get my hands dirty and get involved, I will. And I was always that way. And it's it's one of the things. Even when I started doing consultancy and I started doing audits and duty holder visits, I'd get quite involved in the technical and the jargon, and all the manuals and all the processes. But at the same time, in the workshop, I'd help a guy break down a luminaire and do some fault finding because I was just fascinated with getting my hands in there and actually getting involved with the work. Sometimes it's hard when it's not really your job anymore.
Yeah, it is not to. It is hard to not get involved sometimes and let them get on with it. But sometimes you're like, oh yeah, you think you can do it quicker, maybe not. Probably a bit rusty now.
That's why I like making my own test rigs because I can at least get involved with that. Even tonight. The company that sent me this stuff for my battery rig, they've sent a 3 kilowatt inverter, small thing, 24 volts. But they've sent their brand new battery system, which is this huge weighted piece of thing. But it's a 48 volt battery. So as soon as it connects to the inverter, the inverter goes over voltage fault. So I've now got a source. I've now contacted and said, can you send the right inverter for that battery? But I still connected it together to see how it would work because I wanted to see if the over voltage protection would trigger, and it did. It worked pretty well. But getting your hands on, the rig building is one of the only good kind of practical things I get to do these days.
I must admit, I'm looking at your solar course and battery, and I'm kind of wanting to do that. I haven't got many left to do now, so it's kind of like that's got to be the next one. I think.
I had a meeting this morning actually with Mike about our dev about another idea that we've got in the CPD space because I had a quote from City and Guilds because we used to run obviously the 7909 accredited program when I was working with my dad at Ascot College, and he obviously closed Ascot College post COVID. He kind of just calmed things down, and he now works as an IQA for a big college provider. And we had everything set up, and people still want me to do 7909, but like they quoted 15 grand. And I'm like, I mean, they said, yeah, well, you get 5 programs in time on that. But I was like, I just like to kind of do something now to get moving. Yeah, 15 grand they wanted. I thought, I think I'll just not do that right now. So I'm looking at ideas to kind of have my own kind of CPD kind of system or something for some of the courses that I create. Because these other things, you just pay them money. And they don't actually verify the technical aspect of any of your training. They make sure that you've got a structure of learning, that you've got the right audience for your learning, that it's consistent, that it's not over-marketed, so you're not selling your product too much in it with brands. That's all they verify. They don't verify the technical aspect of it. So I'm kind of like, I had a meeting this morning about an idea that we've got about our own kind of CPD system, which will add to the back end of what we're doing now with the new website that's still in development. But yeah. All right, shall I go? Huh?
Well, while you're on the subject CPD, I suppose that's our next section, and
yeah,
I've been doing my CPD with yourself again, as always. I've been doing your design calculations.
The design we need to update some of those. After a few discussions with you, I've got to do some updates with some new ones. Oh, by the way, 2 or 3 podcasts ago, you come up with this 44 millivolts and then dividing it by the size.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been using that loads now.
I'm
using it. I'm using it all the time. Everything up to 16 mil. It works.
Yeah, it does. It does work. I do have another one today. Actually, I've kind of was sat in a hotel room, so was doing my CPD, and I was reading 61386 for conduit, PVC conduit, and I stumbled across a 60-degree limiting factor for conduit to avoid the degradation of the conduit. So if you've got a cable at full load, you're running at 70, and that's all the tables are all at 70. But the cables can't run at 70. You can only run at 60, but there's nothing really to derate that. So I went on this massive journey of deration through standards. And
so when you say 60, does it mean the conductors within it must be to 60, or the air within it must be to 60, or the same?
The conduit itself must maintain a 60. So for me, it was to reduce the current capacity of the cable so it couldn't get to 60. There might be free air to cool, but I can't really guarantee that.
It's very hard to
So I thought
calculate the free air aspect, isn't it, really?
yeah, yeah. And so I thought the best way, and I got to be honest with you, how often do you see the 35% allowance in conduits actually applied? Most people ram
They just shove them in until they stop pushing in, really, don't they? Just keep pushing them in until they don't fit no more. Same with trunking, yeah.
So it led me onto a bit of a mission where I tried to pick apart the tables in 4D1A for singles,
Okay.
taking IT and then sort of calculating the correction factor so I can bring that down to 60. So what I did is I used reference method B, which is 17.5 at 1.5 mil, and then I used the operating calculation, the ambient temperature times IB squared divided by IT squared times T ambient minus the operating temperature.
So use reference method B because that makes the adjustment for the wiring system from 70. It created a little number, did you?
Yeah. Well, basically what I had to do is take the 17.5 and then I had to deduct that more because I believe that's at 70 degrees in that table.
B would be, yeah, because it's all, you know, all of 482 is it for 70.
So I had to take this chief calculation and then I thought I'm just going to play around with IB until the operating temperature hit 60. So I got my magic number and it was 15. So I thought 15 is great, but I don't want to have to keep, you could put in a calculator and do that and just keep changing the IB until you hit the one you want. But I thought there's got to be a better way of transposing that equation. So I transposed the equation and I ended up with square root over operating temperature of 60 minus ambient times 17.5 squared divided by 60 minus 30, should we say, operating temperature and ambient. And that would give me 15.15 amps. So I'm close to my 15 here. But I thought this is all very good and well doing all this equations and it's an A4 piece of paper long now. I need something quicker. So I took 60 and divided by 70 and I got 15 amps. So I made it quick. Again, like the 44 millivolt per amp per meter thing, I found a little way of reducing it without having to do all that math. So it's as simple as 17.5 times 60 divided by 70 and I got my 15 amp.
So 17.5 times the 60 over 70 number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, basically. I bracketed it off.
First time I've heard this, I'm going to write this down. Okay, so that's a ratio.
A ratio, yeah. So it's a ratio to just derate it without going through all the math, and I've just proved it all using two different methods, basically transposing the operating temperature calculation.
And so that gives us a current that should equal a current that will run that to 60 degrees, not 70.
At 60. Yeah.
Fascinating. All right, mate. Well,
which may help us in the future of like, was it Appendix 8 was going to come out with energy saving? And, you know, do we really need to be running on something? Maybe this is a thing of the future.
Well, I know historically, you know, some MOD sites would only allow designs to go to 50 degrees, and that's why we had those quite long-winded calculations to say, well, what current gets us to that? So it sounds like you're trying to even simplify those even further, which is, you know, we need to do. Yeah, well, that's it, because then we can retain it. We need to do a little segue where we do. We'll have to do like a good video on this where we apply some of these into practice to prove them actually, you know, working. Because that's really fascinating. Another example I had to do literally last week was with Titan X. Do you know Titan X, the H07 cable? It's that one with the orange writing on it, right? The Titan X. And I was working on a temporary electrical installation, but it was installed in a temporary fashion. So Titan X is obviously off-the-shelf 90-degree thermosetting rated. But it says on its data, its product data, that if you install it in a fixed fashion, it's 90 degrees. But if you install it in a temporary fashion, it's 60. So we had to then do a little assessment of it in a temporary nature to make sure. And we had to consider solar gain. We had to put some shading on these cables. But yeah, actually, it's in the spec where you actually read it. It's rated only to 60 if it's installed in a fixed fashion. Sorry, in a temporary fashion. I can only imagine that's due to the handling and the moving of them on the flexi. I don't know.
But, would it be, if it was fixed, you would have some kind of heat sink from plaster?
I would assume if it was fixed, it would be in some way outside of the sun and all that stuff, and it shouldn't have those effects. But I don't know what the real reasons are. But it just says on the data sheet that it's 90-degree fixed, 60-degree not fixed, or in a temporary way. But yeah, so that was interesting. So the need to adjust cables to different temperatures is something that that is becoming more important. We've done some of that on the design course with the more complicated data that calcs that Paul Cook's used in his IET commentary. But it'd be nice if we could look at simplifying these formulas a little bit. That'd be good. Good work, mate.
Yeah, I think if we do a technical one of these and we have it all up and work through the workings and just make sure they, proved and I haven't got something majorly wrong. I spent a bit of time on it. It took me. I think I was having a conversation with you about it. Like, well, how am I going to sort of do this?
Yeah.
It's
good that you just put the little extra work in. You figured out a good way to kind of retrieve it. That's great. My CPD for this week, then. For the week gone, my CPD. I did a bit on surge just to make sure that I cleared up my understanding on reflection and waves and all this stuff with regards to the length and the reactance of the system, the way that transit energy behaves in the nano and the microseconds, and what is more related to lightning versus what's related to switched causes of that. So that was a big area that I was studying. I did a lot of study with Kirsty's material that she provides, Dane's Red Book, which is a great resource, and the FURS, FURSE, or whatever they're called, FURS, they have a good downloadable guide. So I had a good read of all three of those. But at the same time, there was this ongoing debate over on LinkedIn where a chap had... the week before, I had asked a chap from... Well, he's just leaving Dane, Sean, about to just reaffirm his opinion on testing of surges with test instruments. And I think we briefly covered it on a previous podcast. And then obviously the course of last week, a guy who works for a company that sells the device started to this post about having to do it. And then we had this to and fro between him and then other manufacturers. Yes, yes you can, no you can't, yes you should, no you shouldn't. And I was just kind of like adding a little bit. Darren from the ECA had a little bit, Paul had a little bit about what our opinions are. But this guy was very firm that it is in the standards. And I think they haven't come to a conclusion, but clearly the surge manufacturers, the majority of them, have disagreed with this company that sells. What was interesting is the guy was using Dane as an example, because Dane make a tester that tests surge devices, whilst Dane were there saying we shouldn't test surge devices. It's about different horses for courses and different spaces where you would and where you wouldn't. What's interesting, obviously, in the UK, we have to have the status indication there, whilst obviously in other countries, the status indication may not be there, so the need to test is actually more regular and more of a requirement, the need to actually test it, but you need to use the right instrument. And I think nearly everyone, except for one company, has pretty much agreed that modern MFTs aren't the right instrument to do it. So I had a good read up on that, just to kind of make sure that when I talked about it on the surge bit last week, that I gave the latest information, which was as recent as that morning, because they were still ongoing the conversation whilst I was doing the training. I was like, well, what they're saying right now is, and but that was useful, because it let me tell the guys in the classroom that the industry is always chewing on things, and opinions may be one thing one week and one thing the next. And that's why for us as electricians, we've always got our finger on the pulse and always got to check what the latest news is, what the latest thing is, what the latest opinion is, what the latest regulation is. Because it can take, if we just rely on going to an event and going to an exhibition and allowing our membership body to tell us, it can take 9 months to 18 months or so for us to get that information. But if we're actively seeking it, then we can avoid big mistakes. There's all sorts of still being discussed now. There's ongoing issues with open pen. We've got ITO1. We've got a not yet published additional consideration of the British standard for 61851, where they're adding an exception that allows the current the current version of open pen protection, but it still is unpublished, which means all devices with inbuilt open pen protection aren't suitable. And even when it does get published, those devices are not allowed under IETO1 to switch back on automatically are being installed within the 61851 charger. So there's still ongoing problems in IET protection technologies, and we're at that situation where some manufacturers are being just online going, look, everyone, let's just sort this out. We've got IET01 as an example. UK Power Networks has kind of pushed behind it as well. Let's just move forward. But it's a big shitty mess at the moment with regards to that. And I found furthermore, when they do consider the result, we'll have obviously the way the industry will try to tamper that down, so that we don't have to go back and replace or update all of our EV chargers. Which we should.
It's very interesting, the DNC. So what are we protecting against with DNC? Are we protecting against electric shock here?
Well, with DNC, yeah. With the DNC, it's I mean,
there's a reason I asked.
Yeah.
The whole thing about you said about the closing of the device, then there's a regulation that states that no device should, under unskilled persons, reactivate the installation again.
So
and then the EV regulations go on to say in, I think it's 721411 after it, which is ADS.
Well, the thing, and this is the problem. The problem is 7671 pushes that ordinary persons should not be protected by a device that automatically switches back on. So we can't call the open pen device a protected device. We have to call it a detection device that then triggers another device that acts as a protection device. So even like the Matty one that I have on demo at the center, where we've got this device that closes, it opens up in the event of an over 257 and under 207 voltage, and if the voltage recovers for 3 minutes, it then recloses. We can't call it a protection device because it's not recognized for ordinary person's use. If I take that to a factory, I can now call it protection. So these are the challenges that we have with the language of the way the regs is written, and it's a case of just trying to get all that sorted out in the language, because it can come full circle to kind of how there was an abuse of the Class 2 regulation. Because the Class 2 regulation, if you look at 412, where it says you can, double insulation Class 2, and it says that you will not use this for the entire circuit or an entire installation unless it has, and the wording is adequate supervision. Now, we would consider adequate supervision in our language to be, they have to be skilled or instructed, not ordinary. That's what we would consider to be adequate supervision. Well, they haven't put that wording in there to that effect, because the likes of the NIC and similar have housing associations with thousands of properties that have 2 core lighting circuits. And the answer is change it to a Class 2 luminaire, change it to a plastic light switch, and allow the ordinary person to have, under effective supervision, a sticker on the fuse board, the use of that system. They did that because they don't want to have to then rewire all those circuits. And we have the same kind of thing here with Open Pen. Is we'll change the language a little bit, because a device that automatically switches back on is needed, because otherwise we're going to have chargers that are going to obviously turn off and then not turn back on. So we have to, so we'll have to change the way we interpret what that protection is, or have some kind of exception, so that we can call it a protective device, but allow it to automatically reclose. Because at the moment it does what it does, but we can't call it because it doesn't allow us to call it. So I call it a detection device, but it achieves protection in that sense.
Yeah, because it's taken away an electric shock risk. Because the NC would make the case of the bodywork of the car alive, I'm pretty sure.
And interestingly, IET01 has. An IET01 actually allows a wider spread. I think it allows the voltage to go up into the 260s. So that's allowing the companies to actually make it more of a more suitable, because it's less likely to operate. And the reason for that is obviously because with the amount of electronics, the amount of PV systems feeding back in, the voltage is humming a lot more over the 230, and it's bouncing up to that 250 level quite regularly, with all these circulating currents and currents coming in from PV systems for inverters. So they're trying to push and lift the ceiling up a little bit on when the activation of an open pen will be. So the ITO1, I think, pushes it into the 260s range, a little bit, which is a bit more relief for open pen devices, but it's still ongoing. It's still an ongoing mess, and it's funny because some manufacturers are just very flippant about it, saying that here's an issue, are you going to fix it? But many other manufacturers, the charger is one of the things that they do, or they have an expert that they think that they've covered everything, and then whenever there's a discussion, they kind of want to go and do it in a private place. It just leaves us electricians without a real clue as to what's going on, and that means when the regs gets republished, all the words will be different, all the paragraphs will be reshaped, and all the approach will be new. And then we'll be in that situation where what do we do with what we've done, and is everything okay? Because if they're changing it, why are they changing it? A lot of the chargers right now are, not compliant. Are they unsafe? That's not the same thing. It's not that they're unsafe. It's just that they're not compliant. And in many cases, the electrician is now the manufacturer of that charger, but they've not declared that, which again means under electrical equipment safety regulations and the low voltage directive, they're all illegal installations if the declarations haven't been submitted and the electricians haven't claimed ownership of the construction of those technologies. And that's the real crux of all this. And that's why I'm always keeping my attention as to what's going on, because it's still developing. It's probably going to develop a little bit more tomorrow, because it's just ongoing all the time, waiting for more and more information.
Yeah, so it certainly is an issue, especially in my brain. As I've said, it goes around in my head going, oh, this is surely fault protection. This is surely electric shock.
Well, it is, isn't it? Because we're using it for 722.4. So we're using it for protecting against electric shock. 722.4.41 something or other. So we're using it to achieve that purpose. It is achieving protection against electric shock. So again, the language has to shift a little bit, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, a little apology there. I mentioned 721, which is solar PV installations, but yeah,
you amateur.
yeah, amateur. I did realise.
But yeah, so back to last week for me. I just want to have a little talk about what I did. I went to a school, and it was one of my son's school. I've got two boys there. They're in year 5 and year 2. And I had this email from the school about careers, and I'm a STEM ambassador. So about 3 or 4 years ago, Tess put this appeal for electrotechnical STEM, ambassadors to go around and promote the electrotechnical. And it's already something I was already doing. So I said, yeah, I'll carry on doing that. And so I have this little weird card thing, and I have my police DBS checks regularly. And I go to schools and I do these little talks. But normally it's, years 7, 8s and 9s and stuff. But this was year 6s, and it was nice to go to primary. I've done a couple of bits. But this was my boys' school as a parent, instead of some weird person going during the STEM week. This was a careers talk instead. It wasn't about science. It wasn't about technology. It was about electrician. And that's why it was a bit more fun for me. So I went in, and I planned on doing a 20-minute talk with these year 6s, and it was the end of the week. And I spoke to the teacher, and I said, there's been 2 other parents have gone in this week. And I thought, is that it? A policeman and a mum who does sonograms, which obviously, the ultrasounds and stuff. And they hadn't had much more parents getting involved. To be fair, it's a bit of a posh area. My kids go to school. My wife obviously did a good job in getting access to that school. So a lot of the parents run their own businesses and stuff. They're just business people. You can tell because they've got bright white teeth. They've always got brown skin. They've always got nice clothes. And there I am looking like a piece of shit every time I pick up the kids. But it is what it is. There's a few mums and dads who work with the local football club Middlesbrough as well. So I went in and I said hello kids and all this stuff, and they're all like active, and they've all had what's called they've all had this thing where they've gone into the next class up. So they've all gone to their secondary schools to check it out. They're all active. They're all happy. And they all sit down and they go, and they go, so we call him Mr. Watts. I go, David's fine. I think I was supposed to say Mr. Watts because obviously they're year 6s. I never do that, but that's what I was supposed to do, Mr. Watts. And he is a electrician, and he's going to talk to you about that. And so I had this little thing prepared, and the first thing I asked them was, what do you think an electrician does? And all the kids went like this. They're all active. They're all involved. It's lovely. And I go around the room, and they go, fix lights, pull cables in, wire my house, and do this stuff. And I said, where do they work? And they go, building sites. And I was like, okay, great. But it was all the same. Building sites, wiring in houses. Building sites, wiring in houses. So I thought, okay. So thankfully, I had decided to take one little area of my career, which is an area I still dabble in, but it's an area that I was more active in about 10 years ago, which is obviously working in the event and the film area. You know, films, theatres, events, production, broadcasting. And I went down that little rabbit hole. And so I showed a map of the world. I said, "Where do you think I work?" And they went, "There," pointing at the UK. And I went on to the next slide. And they went, "Yes, you're right." And I highlighted the UK. But I also work, and then I did the next slide, and it had pretty much half of the world lit up, because I've worked in North America, South America, Australia. I've worked throughout the UAE. I've worked over in many areas in Africa doing voluntary work. In the many years I've been doing this kind of stuff. And they were like, "Huh?" And I said, "Does an electrician work for himself, or for a huge company, or for a small company?" And they're all giving different answers. Well, actually, all of the above. And they were asking, how much do they earn and all this stuff. I went, well, the more they learn, the more they earn, quoting Mr. Meenan in there. And then I started talking about the film industry and stuff. I said, okay, well, here's a movie, and here's a set, and here's the gaffer, and here's the best boy electric, and here's this. And then I went on this other journey, and I said, what else do electricians do? And I did a slide on Disney cruises. They need electricians, so I had this little bit on electricians at Disney cruises. Aeroplanes, one lad asked about aeroplanes. I said, well, here's an aviation electrician. And I covered all this area about just so they could leave the building site and see where else electricians are. I put Cadbury's there, Cadbury World, and all this stuff, because I work in the food industry as well. And then I did a nice little section on for the girls, because it was 50-50, so there's about 20 or so girls in the room. I said, here's a bit for you. And I had 3 or 4 slides with lots of the girls who follow me on social media, many of whom are still in their late teens and in their early 20s. So, much more relatable to these girls than this, So I showed, pictures of one girl who's working on the railway, one girl who's in a high-vis orange, one girl who's working domestic, one girl who's in grey, just having fun. And I did a case study of one of my former tutors, Anna, who was a 7909 student, because she travels the world and she worked on the Olympics. And so she had on her social profile pictures of her in Beijing, over in Tokyo, and all this stuff. And then I just kind of finished off with that. And then I spoke to the teacher at the end, and the teacher came out and said, I never knew that an electrician had so much offering to go into as a career. I never knew there was so many things that an electrician could do. I squeezed in a talk on the renewables, because that's what our industry would want me to do. We need electricians because we have solar and wind and we have electric vehicles, become electricians now. But I decided to show more of a different arm to it. And they were all super engaged, and the questions were great. How do I qualify? What would I need to do? And all this stuff. And the main point of it was to say that even myself, because I tried the fire service, I tried a few other things, as long as you get your skills and you train to get, your apprenticeship and you get your skills, you can try other things, but you can always fall down on these skills. And it really, really worked very well. And apparently, I got a phone call from the head Tuesday yesterday? Yeah. Saying the kids are still talking about it.
Oh,
and
wow.
so they'd like me to go, next year to do it with the year 6s again. As a regular thing, because they just didn't think that working in this kind of industry, they think construction. I remember listening to Fixed Radio. Shout out to Fixed Radio, by the way, because I called in yesterday to Tom and Paul, and they're going to give us a shout out as well. I was listening to Andy Cam, the plumber guy. He was talking about it, and he took his girl to one of these trade things, and somebody was pointing in the area of the construction industry, and the teacher said, "Oh no, you're too smart for that. You're too smart for construction." And this is an area that I think we really, I'm hoping to get other people more involved in, actually going into schools, speaking to the teachers, to see how much technical development and how much wizardry, especially in sparking, there is, for these kids. At the same time, I want the industry to sort itself out and stop fucking it up, so that if I can push a lot of kids into this industry, I'm not going to actually ruin their lives. Because right now the industry is an absolute shitting mess, for reasons obviously that aren't really our fault, but our fault, the fault of many others. So I did that, and I found that very rewarding. And it only took, I know, but an hour and a half to just throw some photos at a presentation. It was a 20-minute planned talk, but I was talking for about 35, 40 minutes, right into the end, because the kids were just super engaged with how much we do and where we work. Do you work here? Do you work there? What films we've been on? All this stuff. And I was just like, yeah, answer these questions. And they really, really, really were fascinated by how much we can do. And also the way we work, that we can work for ourselves, or we can work with big companies, or we can travel and take some time off, and then we can come back and immediately be in demand, a huge amount of work coming in. And if we can get, so I'm hoping to do that with a few more schools before this year's finished, because my details have been thrown around with the local schools with the teachers. But if more Sparkies found the time to do that, I think that we'd get an awful lot more potential going into FE. Because one of the biggest issues we have with FE is just greedy for funding. So they'll train a pile of shit if the pile of shit will turn up on time. They'll train it, and they'll get the funding for it, and they'll pass it through exams. That's what the majority of FE will do. But if we can actually get good potential attracted to our industry, who are interested in our industry, and have done well at school, but also want to carry on doing well, we'll have a much better trajectory going forwards, I think. Anyway, but yes, that's what I did last Friday. And I found that, it only took about 2 hours of my time. But I've still, I had a letter yesterday from them for their geography fieldwork about renewable technologies. The same year has decided to do study of renewable technologies immediately after my talk for their geography fieldwork. So they sent me a thing to fill in. They're asking me to do some more with them. It just naturally just got the interest going. It's a very rewarding thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's why we do these podcasts as well. We spend a lot of our own time unselfishly doing these. We don't get paid for them. It's all about helping the industry to get better. If you've got an interest in this kind of stuff we talk about, then there's an outlet for that.
There is, and again, it's not for everyone. It's for those who actually find value in it, and find that it keeps them thinking things in a different, in a hopefully in a positive way. Hopefully we don't do too much negative, and we inspire people to learn. Speaking of which, I've got it written down here. A good shout out to Brad, who sent a message to me last week or so asking about uploading the latest episodes, and I ran late last week on YouTube uploading them. They went on Spotify, but it was like it's currently the most interesting content. This podcast, this little relaunch we've done, is some of the most interesting content going out to him at the moment. We're still, whilst we've been doing podcasts a while, we've been working with others for a while and stuff. We're still kind of just getting our own little kind of format going. To a way like you kind of leading on from today, just so that we get a bit more familiar. But we will be. I spoke with Paul yesterday. We will be doing some E5 stuff. End of August is the plan. September time, as well.
Oh, nice.
So we're not stopping that, but we're just mixing all this up really.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, really, the effect this podcast has had, because like I say, we're quite a sized firm, and I must admit I'm getting messages from the lads saying I've watched this, and it's like, oh dear, yeah. So at least I watched it.
Actually, I did get a message from a chap who works for a big wholesaler, all over Europe, and he asked about coming on. I have to look into that and see what we think about him coming on. I want to figure out what he wants to, if he wants to chat about anything in particular. I have to message him back. But yeah, right. So we've covered what we've done over the past week. We've talked about a good bit of CPD we're doing. Is there anything going on in the Facebooks or anything you wanted to talk about? Because
in the Facebook world, there was a post. I don't normally mention the names, but this is quite an interesting name. It was Pine Lobster 847.
Beautiful name.
Yeah, we've gone from anonymous now to. Well, it might be their real name. Actually.
Might be Mr. Lobster.
Why not, Mr. Lobster, Mr. Kind? It came out with a question I thought was quite good, mixed array of answers. The usual Regs book out. But I think it warranted a bit more than that. I did answer to this question, and it wasn't a short answer. And the question basically was: is RCD protection mandatory in industrial settings, and if so, on which circuits?
Is RCD protection mandatory in industrial? And if so, on which circuits?
Yes, basically,
Okay.
yes. I think it was a good question, to be honest with you. I thought it was a probing question.
So are they
It
trying to
started
play
with
with
me,
understanding when ordinary persons aren't involved,
yes.
what the
That's what.
regulatory requirement of RCDs is?
One thing I was thinking of was 411.3.3 where you've got the BA1, BA2, BA3, but then you've also got ident2, which is in other locations other than say where there are BA1, BA2, BA3 users. So it got me thinking about the risk assessment itself. It mentions about a risk assessment for the socket circuits and mobile equipment,
Yeah.
but I didn't see anything for say a cable in the wall to 522.6. There are methods in 522.6204 which, your earth shielded cable, your conduits,
Mm-hmm.
that don't maybe require RC protection for that method of installation, but you might still require it for another reason, i.e. the socket outlet. But that RCD could be at the origin of where it's needed, a 7288 socket. So it got me to saying basically that the cable in the wall under 522.6 may not require it for other reasons. But you might have a risk assessment in place for the socket outlets. But it got me thinking about the risk assessment itself. Do we have a general risk assessment for everything? Because I saw it in 4113.3, but I didn't see it anywhere else in 7671.
I think the
So
point of the
can we
risk
admit,
assessment. I think the point of the risk assessment is about the utilization of the electrical installation of the sockets in particular, where you're just going to take, general use sockets and you're going to use general use equipment by general use people. I don't think they apply for that risk assessment to be used in every other situation where RCDs are recommended in 767. I think it's just under 433 additional requirements of protection there. Because if you think about it, if you go to it, it's a impact, isn't it? In 522. Does it says an RCD to 415.1. It doesn't say an RCD that meets the requirements of 433. Sorry, 411.3. Is it 411.3? No. Yeah. It doesn't say to meet that. It says to meet 415.1. So if it's said to meet 411.3, the additional protection requirement for sockets, then you could say yes, risk assess, risk assess, risk assess. But it goes back to the note that's included with that, and I'm just coming off the top of my head here, but it's note 2 or so there that says, and it was updated in the recent amendment, that for the point of the application of this assessment, providing some mediocre training or whatever to an ordinary person doesn't now make them a skilled person electrically. So you couldn't, for example, go to a place, go cables in the wall in funny directions. I'm going to train you how to know that, and now you're skilled. You can't just throw that around. So no, I would assume that unless any scenario that mentions 415.1, we wouldn't necessarily go, oh, we can use a risk assessment. But again, I'd argue with myself there, because fundamentally the regs are guidance, and if I had a client that had very stringent control manners and very competent persons on site, I could maybe assess risk as to the way they control the installations and the way they fix things if they have people that can manage that risk. So it's down to, again, it's down to the opinion of the designer and how they interpret the utilization and the ability of the users and their capability. As to, if you want to just say it will assess risk and will allow them to have no RCDs for these applications. We can then add departures to 7671 with our reasoning. We can do that, and the departure could be our risk assessment. As long as we have done a sufficient risk assessment, but that's not to comply with 7671. That's for us to do the work progressively. If we want to comply with 7671, then we just would have to put an RCD in if it says to 415.
I think the issue I have with the risk assessment is it blatantly and said as just do a risk assessment, but that doesn't necessarily mean the risk assessment is going to say you can omit the RCD. So when you say do a risk assessment, it's almost said like you just got to slap a risk assessment on it. You could say anything as long as you've got that.
Well, that comes back to our attitude to risk assessments, doesn't it?
Yeah. It seems to be I slap this risk assessment on it, I can omit the RCD. I don't have to think about the actual risk. When you get into actual proper RAMs and you get people viewing them and experts going over it,
I remember
realize not easy.
When I get those scenarios, I try to think about an example I had once. I remember about 10 years or so ago, I was doing... I don't know what I was doing. I think I was doing duty holder training or something on a site. It was a site that had... it was over the road from a very well-known tea company, and they made little servos, little electronic components. And they had on site a laboratory, and in that laboratory there was HV for, you know, destructive testing and for manufacturing, and they had on the site this kind of hierarchy of personnel who would then access areas of the workplace and the laboratory. So when I was doing a duty holder audit, I was like, well, how do you control the flow of personnel so that higher risk personnel could only go, you know, could go all that way, but lower risk could only go so far? And they had it with keypad door entry systems. So obviously, you know, if they were wearing the white lab coats and they were the high level trained engineers manufacturing, throwing 1500 volts, 2000 volts at things, they would be competent and authorized, and they'd have that unique number to get through that door. Whilst, you know, Doris in the office, who's printing and filing paperwork and stuff, probably wouldn't technically be allowed to go that way because she may not have that improved level of risk understanding and knowledge. And that on paper was written very well as a documented level of risk management. It worked fine. But when I watched it, all the doors were held open with fire extinguishers. You know, when I was there on site that time, I was reviewing their processes, and I was seeing them being completely compromised by the behaviour of the workers and the behaviour of the attitude to that culture. So, with the risk, we can write a risk, but we need to make sure we've done a good observation to make sure if we identify a way of managing risk, it's accurate to what actually is happening on site. Because people will use and behave differently. And they'll use electricity and behave differently with it, from site to site to site. You know, some sites are very, very tough, and some sites are not.
There's also a couple of other probing things in this question, and a lot of the answers maybe didn't pick up on. You might have special locations and requirements for it, such as 701 bathrooms, 704 construction sites, 722 EVSE sockets, 705 agriculture, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You may need the RCD fault protection under 411, 405. You may have high fault loop impedance under 419. You may have a TT system where I can't achieve low levels of impedance
all of the above there. Why would we not have an RCD? You know, as long as we correctly select it, we verify it works, you know, with the tools that we have anyway. Why wouldn't we put an RCD in? And, you know, we have to ask ourselves who would try to avoid that. You know, unless there's a continuity supply criticality or a safety criticality, we could look at obviously IT systems, UPS systems, and backup systems. Then anyway, we could still incorporate RCD protection effectively. You know, interesting question. I like questions like that because sometimes it just gets, you know, sometimes you go, it gives you a short response, but sometimes you can kind of dive deep with that to try to really get the nitty gritty of when you can and when you can't. But the risk assessment itself has been changed. If you know that use of a risk assessment has changed a few times over recent amendments. It's still a little bit flaky. One thing that we have to add here at this point, we also use a risk assessment with electric vehicle charging point installations when we're utilising TT systems or TN systems respectively. But we have to have the separation distances of overlapping earthing systems, and all risk assessments must be reviewed. Anyone who's worked in safety knows this. So when we do an EICR, we're supposed to have documented the risk assessments. If they're not there to review, how can we then review them? How can we then improve them, adjust them, edit them, or reinforce them? You know, PV arrays, same kind of thing. And we've got big issues in the future with PV arrays because there's a huge lot of talk this week on LinkedIn about, you know, the aging of PV, of the old PVs, and the lack of, at the time of installation 10 so years ago, an effective maintainability system. An awful lot of arrays have just been left on the roof. There's been shading, there's been bird rot, there's been all sorts of things, and they didn't have effective maintenance strategies. So we're going to have an awful lot of demand for upgrading and replacing existing PV systems as well as installation of new. All this was based on risk assessments as well. You know,
I must stress on this post that some of our members are not too kind sometimes. And I
Oh,
think that was a very good question. And I'll probably read one out that somebody just went on the full attack mode, basically. Uh, just basically, seriously, does anyone actually own a regs book anymore, or do they just immediately think to post a non on here every time they think they're going to get sent somewhere out their depth, or being asked to look at a job where they are also out their depth? I don't believe that question was
no,
a stupid question.
we
I
get
thought that was a
questions like
very
that.
in-depth
We get questions
question.
like that a lot, especially in the Discord where people don't feel so like vulnerable to the reactions of others. You know, we know a few people in particular will always ask questions which we know aren't really actual scenarios, but they're thinking about it because they're thinking in a way they try to logically stretch the regulations to as much as they can. And that's what we want. We want people to understand the regulations to the degree where they can then stretch them to the point where they know the limits of the regulations because then they can use them more effectively. The regulations are, you know, it's just words in a book, but we need to know the boundaries of the regulations so we know, obviously, when we're tipping over the edge. So questions like that encourage those debates are very good. It's kind of the point of creating the groups in the first place to, to provide a place for safe and supportive debate. I've many times just had to go in there and just ban or silence people who are just, being frustrating. If you're ever, Fridays and Saturday nights are always, always busy nights. So we kind of give a little bit of grace. We give a little bit of grace those nights because some people have, they get a little bit miffed online. They don't realise which group they were in all of a sudden. But yeah, if people aren't just nice, then we just remove them. We did this with one of the groups. We did remove the anonymous posting recently. Have you noticed any
Yeah.
kind of reaction to that, or is that okay?
Which group was it? Was it the ninja group itself, or was it the two for? I can't remember which group it was.
I
I
can't
did
remember.
see a.
It was the one that I said that I was going to do it in. I left it. I gave it a week, and everyone, I think, 85% of people voted to remove it. So we let the members decide what to do. I think
It kind of
85%.
boggles my mind about this anonymous. I mean, I put my name on there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe sometimes I would want to post anonymously because I didn't want them to know it was me because I might get a different opinion. Or they won't want to answer maybe because it's me.
I have
Uh,
I have done that twice because sometimes when I post, people just stop talking, and I don't like that.
yeah,
I want people to kind of think, oh, I want people to go, oh, he's here, I better not say anything. I want people to call me a twat. I want people to say, you're
yeah.
wrong, so I can then look in the mirror and go, I am a twat. I want to do that because I want to learn and I want to develop from others around me. So I have once or twice posted anonymously just to kind of just fuel a discussion. But yeah, we took it down because that's what they wanted because it was like everyone was using it for scenarios where it
Yeah,
really,
no, no,
really, really
I
wasn't necessary. We created the
but
apprentice group anyway for people who really felt vulnerable to the questions they were asking.
yeah.
Um, but anyway, we're still learning the best way to do this. We are, we're always reflecting on how it's going, and hopefully we're still doing a fairly good job of it.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging to keep up with the groups, but I'm still there trying to keep up with them. I don't catch everything, but I'm trying my hardest to get it all.
And an amazing job you're
Sort
doing,
of
mate.
right. Yeah, I try my hardest. It does keep me sharp. I have actually kind of this is a rare for me. I don't normally reply anymore because some people don't like my in-depth regulation talking nonsense. So I had a bit of stick at that and a few likes for it. So I decided that I'd probably come away from doing that, especially with this and busy at work anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably my time. But I thought that question warranted me
I liked
giving
it.
an
Yeah,
answer.
yeah. No, that was a good one.
Yeah.
Was there any
So
others
I
on
think
Facebook, or was that this week's one?
we're pushing the time a bit
Yeah, we're
at
just
the
over the hour.
moment. We've probably got people falling asleep by now, so I expect we wrap that
We'll wrap
one
this
up
one up.
and
All right, mate.
go for another one really soon.
All right. Well, that's been lovely catch up. As I say, I had a good week last week. Good spouts of CPD. Got some stuff that's going on right now in the pat testing game. Got some stuff going on in the HV game, which is something I've not done too much in the past few years on, which is fun. And I've got a little bit of stuff going on in what's it called? Acoustics. where I've been asked to get involved. So hopefully in a couple of weeks I can talk more about what I'm doing there. Otherwise, thank you everyone for listening. We'll get these out again. We'll try and get these out at least. We'll try to do every other week, but weekly we do aim for. And I'll let Dave sign us off.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening. I hope you find it eventful. If you have anything you want us to go over and discuss in the future coming podcast, please put it in the comments below. We look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Thank you very much for your time.